Welcome back everybody. Here is another video with your favorite Mr. Cator. This video we're going to be continuing part 5 of the C# API with clean architecture. In this episode we will explore how we can use the code first approach of structuring your database with entity framework. You'll also get to explore the entity framework CLI commands like migration and update database that will make sure that whatever code you wrote goes and update your database. We'll also get to check how you can easily create a database, add a table, give permissions as well for a user to be able to read data from the database from your API. And one last great bonus is the ability to see your database within your VS Code IDE. Otherwise, without having to waste much of our time, let's just jump straight into the code and let's have this fun. Just a quick recap of what we did from the last video is, remember we added a layer called the application layer wherein all the business domain knowledge or logic goes and sits there. For now, we were able to just use the memory cache to kind of save our data, so more of simulate how a database would be used with a memory cache. In this video, we'll definitely be going to extend this functionality, and instead of using the memory cache, we'll use the database directly. In this example, we'll be using the Microsoft SQL database. To begin off, just go ahead and right click on top of the infrastructure project, go and say add, and then add a folder called models. I'll fast forward a bit to just copy in the files that I would like to see within the model. Now that we have seen the models that are going to be within our database, the first one will be user details, which will just have the ID and the username of the user that is going to be saving your to-do, and then followed by the to-do that user will get to add into the database. This will be having your ID of the to-do and as well as have a reference to the user to details table and data that you can think of it as a foreign key into the user detail table, and also other additional properties within a to-do. You also can have different categories under a certain to-do. So these categories can have many relationship with your to-do, and that's the reason why we're going to introduce the bridging table to make sure that we can have both reference to the to-do details and as well as the category details, and obviously the ID of its own. To see this in a much more visual way, I thought we should just write this ERD diagram that shows the relationship between these different tables that our entity framework will go and add for us into our database. Of course, we have a user, and the user has a one-to-many relationship with to-dos, which means one user can have many other different to-dos within the database. And of course, now we do have this one wherein it says we do have some sort of categories under this to-do, but then this category can have many to-dos that it's linked to, and obviously the to-do can have many categories that are associated with it. And that's the reason why we did introduce this yellow table, which I like to think of it as a bridging table that shows the relationship between these many categories and these many to-dos and how they kind of relate with each other from them. But other than that, let's just jump straight into the code and explore how we can go and model this data and see it in action. I'll go ahead and paste another folder called data, like that, and that folder will have a very simple C# class, right? Of course, I mean, you're asking yourself, where is this entity framework core coming from and all those kind of things. If we just check the things I installed on this infrastructure layer, it's number one, the Microsoft Entity Framework Core. I mean, you can just install any version you wish, and as well as we can install Microsoft Entity Framework Core Design, and as well as Microsoft Entity Framework Core.SQL Server, and as well as Microsoft.Entity Framework Core.Tools. If you don't really know how to install those, definitely you just have to do right click, manage NuGet packages, and then it will take you here. Click the tab under browse, then you can say Microsoft that, and then you search for it. Then you should be able to choose the correct version. I had to install version 7.012 because I'm using .NET Core 7, so it looks like it goes with the version you are using for .NET Core. So if you're using .NET Core 8, then go ahead and install the latest stable version. I'll go ahead and save the file, and as well, just make sure that my stuff still builds. So I'll run rebuild, and it should be able to work. Let's just check what is in this Cator to do context file. So think of this class as the one that models how you connect into your database from your code. So which means if you want to do some sort of an operation into the user detail table, you just create an instance of this context, or you can just inject it, which we're going to see it in this video later. Inject it and then be able to call the methods that says maybe get this where that, or add this where that, and then you do it the very same way you would be able to do it in the database. You can see here it says DBset will translate obviously your code into queries against your database, which saves you, writing functions in the database and, other complex stuff. And this is where obviously the power of Entity Framework Core comes in. But let's look at this file from the top up. Make sure that you implement the DBContext class here so that you have access to both this override and as well as the BD, DBset, and other functionalities to connect to your database in your own custom context. This one, obviously, it's an overridable function, which means it's there by default, but then we want to provide our own implementation to say it should use the SQL server. Ensure that you also install the SQL extension from Entity Framework so that you can have access to this method. But then what it's doing, it's saying, okay, the builder also include the SQL server and its configurations, which I'll go and explain each property from there and how to get it from your MS database. And then obviously now then we go and import the DB sets that we would like to use in here. I mean, these are just literally the models we spoke about here, and you just need to make sure that you make them a type of DB set, and as well there needs to be this name with the getter and the setter so that you can be able to use them properly. So for the database, you can just go ahead, in your Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio, you can go ahead and connect, make sure that it's in. You can check other videos on how to do that, and then say new database. So once you say new database, give it obviously the database name, and then you can just say okay, and then it will be able to edit. So in my case, I have already added the database. But what I would like to show you is, let's say I want to execute a new query under here. This query is the query that will allow us to create a user that we can use to access the database details data. This is going to be very handy because we need to authenticate somewhat to the database to be able to get data there and then set it and update it accordingly. So to go about it, you can also find this in the Microsoft document when it says this script, the first one, which says create login my DB user. This is just like your username that you're going to use to access this data within the current database. In my case, is the Cator to do database. Then with the password, that you can set any password that you wish and obviously tell it to go. I'm not going to execute this because I've already set it from my side. And now you can create a database user for the login details you have created above. So this is okay. Just go and create a user that for the login that, I mean, mostly you can just name the very same name here. You can name this anything else, but just for easy reference to the specific logins you've created above, just keep the name consistent. Another thing that I found very tricky after adding this user was actually setting the properties so that my database can work. So I had to go to, I mean, you saw the database, and then I click properties, and then I click permissions. So under permissions, there will be a few things you will get to see. Number one, the server name. This is quite important for the database connection string, and as well as the database name. I mean, you can just grab it from the name that we have there, or you can come and check it from the permissions. And as well, you can see here the name of the user. For me, I had created it as Cator to do DB, but in your case, whatever the name of the user you created from the previous .proc, you can just use it from there. So what you need to go and do is make sure you click on Cator to do DB, double click on it, and ensure that you have the permission, or you grant the permission to connect to the database. The other permission is allow it to create the table. The reason why this is important is because when you first run your entity framework core migration scripts, it tries to go and create these tables from the classes you have added. So you need to grant this user these permissions to create the table. And I mean, if any other thing is failing in the future, then we can always come and, edit here to say, oh yeah, allow this user to be able to do this outside this database interface. Another very important thing is to go at the top here, click the server name and say properties. And then from there, you will see that there is an option for security. Go and say under server authentication. By default, it will be only on Windows authentication mode. Allow the SQL server and Windows authentication mode. This SQL server will allow us to authenticate into this database using the user that we have created with the permissions that we have created. So that is it for your database. So far, I've explained to you how to get the server name, how to get the database name, how to get the user, and how to set one, and how to create the login for that user, and as well as the password. And another one, obviously, just make sure that trusted server certificate is set to be true as well. You're probably asking yourself, how do we put these things together? I'm going to paste another file that I'm going to, it's going to be a service collection extension, similar to how we did it in the application. The reason why I prefer to do it this way is so that you can always manage all these injectables or dependency injections in one file, in one place, and have your IServiceCollection configuration per project in one file, and then we can just always take it back to the program CS file. So in this case, if I go into it, you will see that it's adding a DBContext of Cator to do context. And I mean, that DBContext is definitely coming from the, obviously, Microsoft extension, dependency injection, obviously imports these iService collections. And this DBContext, obviously, it's a normal thing that comes with that. And then we return the collection. And once we are done with that, we can go into the program CS file. All I had to do is just obviously have the infrastructure layer imported in here as well. Infrastructure, and it should be something like that. Yeah, that will work. So then, I mean, then we put it in here. So these are my custom iService collections. So yeah, that is it. This should be able to work. Let's see how we can run our first .NET-ef core migration, and as well as update our database. To be able to use your .NET-ef tools, you can go ahead and just type .NET tools install -global. This will just install it on your whole computer, and then say .NET-ef, which this will install. It's already installed in my case, or you can just type this inside your CLI within your Visual Studio, and then it will install it, and then you can be able to use the commands we're going to use soon. You can choose to see the database directly on your VS Code. That's where you can go and click View and then Server Explorer, and then you can see here there is a database connection into the PC and Matodzi database and server. So if I click refresh and then I expand the tables under here, you will see that there is literally no table at all. But let's go ahead and see how we can run our first migration script that should be able to create at least a few tables. So I go ahead, right click, and then open terminal. The first script I'm going to run is going to be .NET-ef migration add, and then you give the migration the name. So I think I'll just call it the initial migration, and then I press enter. Let's give it a second. The command migration. Oh, okay. Yes, we need to be migrations, not migration. This should be, yep, that's good. So it goes ahead and create a new C# file that has my initial migration. So what this is, literally, it is just instructions on how to create maybe the category table, and as well as the columns it should go and add, and obviously any annotations that needs to be there. I mean, you can see it says it's an identity, which means it's a primary key of 1 of 1, and then as well as some other properties that will tell you, okay, this is going to be a voucher of type of a certain value, and all those kind of things. You can put these annotations directly onto your classes that you created here, but for me, I try to just keep it as easy, as simple as possible. And you can see it goes ahead and create all these other different tables in here. But for us to be able to say, hey, we see this migration that has been created, go and push this update into our database and then make it effective. Then we have to go and say .NET. I don't know what's happening here. Let me just say CLS and just clear. Okay, there's some glitch here at the bottom. Don't worry. Just look at here. Let's say we need to say .NET-ef, of course for entity framework, database, and then we say update. So it's like, okay, go and run the latest migration script that was never run before into the database. And that is it. So it will take some few minutes, but once it's done, you will see the magic happening. Say build successful, apply the migration, all that kind of things. So if I go back into my tables, these are the very same tables you will see on your database, and refresh, you will see that there is 4 new tables that were added, and as well as the table to show the migration history. So I think I would like to just say select show table data. Yes, it's gonna go and select a few, and then it will just show you obviously the version it was ran on and the migration name that was ran, which means if we go ahead and then let's say, I think there was a user, no, a to-do that we want to at least show you that we can be easily add a new property and then just do the very same thing we did now, and then it should show there. So let's go ahead and, nope, we want to open it to do show table. You can see it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It has 5 columns, right? But then if we want to just run another migration to make sure that this new column can be added, then it should just be easy as ABC. So I probably say, I'm calling it migration number 2. And then I do that. One second. Then it will go create those instructions on how to do it. But then now when I say .NET-ef database update, it will just go and be like, oh, I'm gonna go grab the last one and then edit there. So it's interesting to see that this migration doesn't go back and say start from creating a table. No, it just says, okay, from a certain table that is already there, I'm going to add additional property, which is completed in the table that, and obviously with a specific thing, type, which in this case is a boolean. So it's just like remove this, add that. I think it's done. So I'm going to just show property. Wait. Show table data. Yeah, there it is. It has now added the new column, this is much better than you having to write your SQL scripts and all those kind of things. You just go and update these models and then it updates in the right way. I hope you are enjoying the video so far. Did you know that Cator can also offer specialized one-on-one and group sessions to assist you with your specific coding problems? From understanding your issues to full software development, we've got you covered. Be sure to try out our offerings and enjoy up to 60% off for a limited period of time.